Hello everyone. Welcome to another part of What If Deku Was a Scientist. If you enjoy the story, please like, subscribe and share the video. It really helps me out. I did not write the story. The original writer is that chicken dude. Please go support them. Now let us dive in. Are you sure about this? Izuku worriedly asked his mentor as he watched him pack up for his meeting at Tartarus. Egon turns to him, nods affirmatively, and states, "Of course I am. He may be the last living family I have left. I would rather take the chance than live my life regretting I never tried. Besides, the worst he can say is no." He sighs as he locks down the briefcase and says in worry, "I'm just more worried about Cho." "What about me?" the woman asked as she stepped into the office. Egon walks up to the woman, puts on a sympathetic expression, and asks her, "Are you sure you're okay with asking him to work for us? The whole reason this will work is because he's so smitten with you. He'll be after or all over you every day." Cho rolls her eyes and waves him off while assuring him with a nonchalant attitude, "It's fine. Like you said, we need some bodyguards around here and robots can only do so much. Plus I've worked in the armed forces, he's no different to the loads of other guys I've worked with. That doesn't make it any better. Nor does it help me feel right about it." Egon stresses his worries. "Think of it this way. He likes me, so I can have him do whatever I want," she tried to assure him again, giving him a placid smile. Egon gives her an expression of dismay as he shoots back, "Cho, manipulation isn't morally better than harassment, sexual or otherwise." Later at Tartarus. It took Egon about an hour to drive to the high-security facility, and another hour just to get through every last consumes and security detail just to have his meeting with the only two people he would even want to come to this hellhole for. Once in the meeting room itself, Egon had to wait an extra half hour just for his first visitor to show up. Kendo Rappa, the ex-Yakuza member, ex-member of the 8 Bullets, and the only survivor of the Yakuza invasion on NIP. Once the huge man sat down and was restrained, Egon couldn't even get the first word in as he exclaimed, "Yes. You didn't even let me finish," Egon told him. "You want to hire me as muscle for your Labradors, right?" Rappa guessed. "Laboratory and yes," Egon corrected and confirmed. "Then I agree," Rappa insisted. Egon raises an eyebrow then deadpans, "It's for Professor Cho, isn't it?" "So that's her name, Cho," Rappa purrs like a cat as he stares off into space. Egon snaps his fingers a few times to get his attention from La La Land, and informs him, "Well, in addition to being a bodyguard, I would also like you to be our test monkey." "Test monkey?" Rappa questions. "Basically we're gonna make things and you have to break them, if at all," Egon explains. "I get to fight things on top of that?" Rappa excitedly shouts. "Pretty much," Egon confirmed calmly. Rappa then slams his hand on the table and yells, "Sign me the fuck up." The following person he met also took another half hour to complete after taking Rappa away. During this time, Egon grew increasingly anxious about it since it may be life-changing. For at least one of them. The officer standing beside him, the one who was usually on call to deal with anything regarding NIP, could see the man's anxiety rise with every finger tap. So he tapped his shoulder and asked him, "You sure you want to do this? He's a death row inmate." Egon took a soothing breath and assured him, "I have to take the chance, Momo. He may be a criminal but he's still my brother. If he rejects it then I have no choice but to let the law do its thing." He then smiles at the man and says, "By the way, thanks for finding him." Momo smiles back and nods his head as he eats the doors unlocked and he says, "I wish you luck in that regard." When the doors open, 4 muscular guards all come in holding what look to be catch poles as they walk in a large man in a straitjacket alongside the stand restraints and quirk-dampening collar. Once he was sat down and fully restrained in the chair across from Egon, he finally got a better look at the man. He wore a straitjacket and the typical prison garb orange jumpsuit. He was tall but not as tall as him and yet so much wider and more muscular, making Egon a bit jealous. His hair was short, spiky, and colored blonde, and a near-constant scowl adorned his face. One of his eyes was black and the other was a fake with a large scar that went over it alongside part of his cheek and forehead. Egon cleared his throat, as he noticed himself staring and started with, "You must be Goto Imasuji? And who the fuck are you?" he sneered back in a snarl. Egon gulped and centered himself as he stared off by saying, "This is gonna sound really stupid and I'm sure you'd want to kick me in the crotch for even suggesting it dashed. I want to do that already," Goto told him flatly. Egon sighed and just boldly told him, "You see, the thing is, I'm your brother." Goto's eyes went wide with a mix of surprise and disbelief as he mouthed back, "What? I know, it sounds ridiculous. But it's true, we have the same mother, unfortunately, Egon explains while putting his chin on his propped hand. So you met Mom? Goto inquired. Like I said, unfortunately, Egon rolled his eyes. Where's she at? Jail. Jail? She stalked me and my protege to our facility, walked in, and demanded money for some bogus reason, Egon began to explain to him. That sounds like her, Goto agreed. Then attack me and my protege, Egon explains further with anger bubbling up. Also sounds like her, Goto agreed once again while rolling his good eye. And then I knocked her out with a decorative pillar, Egon finished with a proud expression. Goto's eyes went wide at that part and he exclaimed with excitement, I wish I had been there to see that. I won't lie, it felt really fucking good, Egon admitted while tightening his fists with a huge smile on his face. I bet, Goto agreed, leading to the two brothers having a good laugh. Once they ended their merriment, Goto got severe again and stated in a deadly tone, but though, what do you want? And what did you mean by facility? Egon blinked at him dumbly for a moment before it clicked and he asked, oh. Have I not introduced myself? Goto disapprovingly shook his head and Egon punched himself while saying, sorry, I'm Professor Egon Cristallo, part owner and operator of the Neo-Icon Phoenix Research Facility. Now it was Goto's turn to look at him dumbly and Egon inquired, you haven't heard of me, have you? Goto just shook his head. You must not get the news or TV here in Tartarus, do you? Egon asked and Goto gave him an expression as if to say his question was dumb and obvious. So after sighing in self-disappointment, Egon informs him, I don't mean to toot my own horn but I and my protege are kind of a big deal. So that's why Mom came looking for you, Goto said to himself after putting the pieces together. Sitting up straight he told his brother, I had wondered why the old fart demanded where she was some months ago. Guess now I know. Egon gave him a questioning look and asked back, old fart? Oh, you mean your dad? That meathead our mother left my dad for? Goto grunted and rolled his eyes as he spat with venom, yep, that's him. Don't worry, he's on the far side of Japan so he shouldn't worry you. Plus he's an alcoholic so I won't be surprised if he drank himself to death. Thanks for the assurement, I think, Egon said in confusion and worry. But really, what do you want with me? Don't you know who I am, and what I've done? Goto demanded, getting increasingly more threatening with every word. Making the guards tense up while Egon just sat there calmly. Egon sighs at his reaction and tells him, I know everything. On the streets you're known as the villain muscular, you're a thief, hired muscle, and killer. You've done so much I could be here for the next hour just summarizing it. Then why are you here? Goto demands. Because any way you see it, we're the only family we have left, Egon tells him, a sad and longing tone in his voice. What about your dad? Goto pointed out. He died with my mom, stepmom last year, Egon explains. And, Goto prompted him. Egon sighed exasperated, at his constant questioning, but it made sense due to his history, so he explained as nicely as he could, and I want to help you. And not in an, it's my job or, for the good of society at large, kind way. I want to help you, 'cause I want to. You're bluffing, Goto stated, not sounding as sure as before. If I was, I wouldn't be here. I'd let you continue to rot in this hell, Egon points out. Goto glances down at the table and asks, why? Because I understand you. No, you don't, Goto growls at him, shooting the stink eye. Egon props his head on his hand and then verbally dissects, no one's given you a chance, have they? You've always been put down, told you weren't worth something, or couldn't achieve what you wanted. So you finally broke and became all the things they whispered behind your back, just within earshot. Goto visibly cringes at this. I do know what it's like to be you. Ido. But unlike you, I had parents who always assured me those things weren't true while yours did the opposite. Egon guessed and seeing his expression and body language, knew he hit the nail on the head. I know you may not want to accept my help because to you it seems like I'm just lying or using you. But I'd never forgive myself if I didn't at least try to extend an olive branch, Egon offers to the man. But Goto just turns his head away and in a low tone tells him, leave me alone. Egon sighs dejected and takes a card from his pocket while placing it down on the table. In case you change your mind, here's my card. Call it and I'll bail you, he tells him. I have a life sentence, Goto murmured. I have connections and money, Egon told him without trying to sound as though he was bragging. But even so, Goto didn't see his eyes and seemed to retreat into his straitjacket. Just think about it, okay, Ototo-kun, Egon pleaded as he left the table and then the room, leading Goto to be hauled back to his cell with the card in the hand of Officer Momo. This is Dr. Izuku Midoriya reporting from the Neo-Icon Phoenix Research Facility, or what's left of it. And by that I mean we got invaded and beaten up really badly. I'll explain later, but for now, this is just another update of the goings-on around. The first thing to cover is we were invaded, again. But we survived, mostly. It was the Yakuza, and they were after something that is currently classified. They lost a lot of their forces in the beginning until the boss carved a path. Then we took them out one after the other till only the boss was left. However, he used his quirk, called Overhaul, to construct himself a massive false body made from the remains of his men, and the building itself, this leading to a whole heap of damages and whatnot. Then we sent Torchwick after him and with the aid of heroes was finally defeated. And for what happened, the only thing I can say, on camera, is that he got torched, no pun intended. The only survivor of the attack on the Yakuza side was one of the 8 bullets, a man who went by the name of Kendo Rappa. He was also responsible for the only injured party on our end, but that was due to Dr. Cho trying to fight him on her own. Apart from that and the building, everyone is fine. Due to this, the Japanese government has allowed us free access to a plot of land I had in mind for an expansion of the facility. In one small part as a thanks for taking down the Yakuza. But now we've had to condemn several parts of the facility due to the damage and possible breaches from thieves. Anyhow, that's the current situation we're experiencing. Now we just have to get in contact with Uraraka Construction Company to start building our new facility. We're even gonna add dorms. For obvious reasons. Anyway, just before the invasion Dr. Hankoyo S. per Spider, Ungoliant, got into the camber where we kept the first Singularity Soul where one fragment remained after breaking it. And, well, she got, bigger. Like way bigger. So big that she nearly outsized the room she was contained in and now we have to break the walls down just to get her out cause she hasn't stopped growing. In addition to that, several changes were made to her physiology as she was exposed to the radiation. First, she grew to over 25 foot tall and is currently 50 foot tall if she holds up her thorax and stretches her legs out. Apart from that she almost doesn't even resemble a spider anymore. Sure she's got the spindly legs, fangs, and thorax of one, but she isn't. She now has several dozen eyes all bunched up on her head, all colored red. She has 12 legs of varying sizes, and once microscopic hairs are now large and thick enough to look more like spikes that cover her body. Her jaws now hinge like a mammal instead of an arachnid, and a whole host of different sized teeth sit inside, some of which are layered like shark teeth. Honestly, she horrifies me. She also has the innate ability to eat light and expel darkness. I don't know how she does it, but she does. And when she eats the light in a certain area, no light can penetrate the darkness left behind. We've tried everything from replacing bulbs and wiring but no light, not even fire will shine in that room. I'm really glad Ungoliant is on our side, otherwise, she might just eat every last bit of light on Earth and leave it in endless darkness. Apart from that she can also create black webs from her abdomen. We're not entirely sure what the webs can do, but one thing we do know is that they can be woven into an invisibility sheet that was used during the invasion. Apart from that the webs are just normal, with the additional fact they are man-sized and are stronger than steel but far lighter. But enough of the giant spider was trying to send it over to Pacifica. Instead, let's talk about, actually, just that. Today is finally the day we send Torchwick over to Pacifica. I'm sad to see him go, but happy to know he'll have more room to move around and fly and not that cramped enclosure. Speaking of the island, it's gotten bigger, now it's nearly as long as India, but not half as wide. It's even started to develop a large section of archipelagos. We really underestimate just how powerful the island bloom was. Having said this, Genus, after being told he had free reign to put whatever he wanted on it, got a bit carried away. And by that, I mean a lot. He made a whole host of creatures for the island in addition to a bunch of others that he used to test several evolution-based theories. Since many of them couldn't be brought out to the public or killed, we decided to stick it there since the island only has plant life and nothing else. Now I'll be going over each creature created and will now be calling Pacifica its new home. I'll also be putting them in separate categories. Piscine, mermaids, sirens, whales, plesiosaur, and shark. Note, not all the animals on this list are exclusively fish and are simply referred to as being aquatic. Sirens. The siren is an unusually large fish that has gained the ability to move upon land and breathe air. It's related to the lungfish and has several adaptations for both land and sea-based activity. Its pelvic fins have grown into arm and hand-like structures allowing for mobility on land via dragging. Though slow on land, they move like a torpedo in the water. Their tails are more similar in structure and usage to an eel. They have a very simple human-like skeleton that allows them to prop upwards and can collapse this skeleton to become more streamlined or hide in smaller places. They have fins upon their heads that give the appearance of hair and a facial structure that resembles a human face, save for the huge fish eyes on the upper part of its skull. They can change color at will but mostly stay in shades of blue to green with reds and yellows mixed in. Unlike their mythological counterparts, they don't have a hypnotic song. Instead, they mimic the sounds they hear to lure prey. Their most common prey is mermaids. Mermaids, this group comes in 3 separate groups, thusly called common mermaids, selkie, and mero. I will go into detail on each separately. Common mermaids are the most abundant. They were made from apes and, unlike the sirens, are mammals and not fish. They have physiology nearly comparable to humans, save for the lower half which has both legs fused to make a tail. They are covered in a structure similar to the keratin shell of a pangolin, giving them the appearance of scales nearly all over the body that appear green in color. They are completely hairless, save for the head, which is in abundance and long, used for both matting and allure. Males and females are nearly indistinguishable from each other. They have large eyes, webbed fingers that are highly dexterous, and an intelligent mind that can craft tools. They no longer resemble apes and now have a very uncanny valley-like appearance. They are fast swimmers, can hold their breath for 20 minutes, and are highly social. Selkies are monkeys gone under the same changes. Although they keep their original face, their bodies are more similar to pinnipeds. They can easily move on land and gracefully in the water, hold their breath for 15 minutes, live in large family groups, and are unusually friendly. So friendly in fact that anyone can just walk up and pet them. They come in shades of brown to beige and have a diet similar to common mermaids, crabs, fish, squid, and clams. They are also not half as intelligent as common mermaids. Mero are large and aggressive mermaids that were once chimpanzees. They are far larger than the other 2 kinds and will regularly predate them and sirens. They have a female-dominant social structure with males being only half the size of the female. They come in colors ranging from brown to gray and some will even have spotted patterns. They appear much like walrus but are far larger and possess large tusks that protrude from the lower jaw to impale prey. They have no higher intelligence and always act like elephant seals in heat. Plesiosaur, this creature is not like the ancient dinosaur or the legendary Loch Ness monster. Instead, it's a sea turtle with an extended neck, making it appear as such. Due to their longer neck, reaching lengths of 10 feet, they can no longer go on land and must remain in the water full time, which they are adapted to. They feed on fish, squid, crabs, and unsuspecting sea birds. Despite their design, they move very easily in the water and can use their necks, and amazing eyesight, to peek above the water for prey and threats. Shark, the only shark we have is called the twin-tongued Wrangler shark. This shark is much larger than any currently known shark, colored a dark red, and looks like any other shark. Apart from that, they have 2 sets of dorsal and tail fins to help them swim more easily through the water. As you might guess, having so many attachments and a larger size, they need lots of food. And because of their size, color, and slow speed, getting food is nearly impossible. So they have a lure in their mouth that appears as a hand. If they can swim close enough or the prey does, they shoot out 2 tongues covered in teeth to grab and pull the prey into its mouth. Whales, we currently only have 1 type of whale and thank goodness for that. We have called it the beach whale. It appears as a bowhead whale that can safely beach itself using its fins to pull it up and away from land like a sea lion. With this, it can escape certain predators, sunbathe, or sleep on land. It's also extremely intelligent and empathetic and will help beached whales back to the sea. We hope they go far and wide to help in these efforts. Avane, alicorn, griffins, banshee, red face breast, ancient peafowl, dodo. Note, we have created several dozen kinds of birds, but in this, I will go over just a few. Not all the animals here are birds, but are out here in the fact they can fly. Alicorn, despite its name, it is not a fusion of a unicorn and a pegasus, it's more similar to that of a flying reptile. It appears as a very large upright, pteranodon-like creature that is about the size of a horse. Their upper limbs are single fused fingers with skin-making wings and their back limbs are 2 hoof-like toes. They possess a large thick beak that gives them a horse-like appearance and a large horn on its head with smaller ones scattered about the base. Males will use this and their wings to fight during mating. They are completely omnivorous and will eat anything they can fit in their mouths or beat it to death with their beaks. They come in off-white to cream and even the rare black coat. They live in small herds during the mating season and will diverge afterward. Griffin, despite its name, it looks nothing like the half-lion half-eagles of the old myth. Instead, it's another, and strictly carnivorous, flying reptile. In saying that we have several different types of griffin, but I will name and explain two. Sand-coat griffin is the smallest of their kind, only about the size of a large owl, colored sandy yellow with patterns on the top side of the wings with said wings and a body plan that allows them to soar almost indefinitely over superheated terrains like deserts. Unlike the other kinds of griffin, they stick low to the ground when idly as opposed to upright. Their beaks are grooved for catching and holding prey until they can perch and eat, and are covered in a mix of fur-like quills and scales for reflection of the harsh sun. Blue-throated griffin is the largest griffin and gets its name from the makes have a bright blue patch of quills on their chest and throat region. They stand upright at 8 foot tall with massive wingspans and clawed back feet with hooked beaks for pulling prey apart. They have the second sharpest eyes, the first being the sand coat, and the best hearing. They mate with the same partner every year and help raise the chicks. Banshee, this creature was once a stingray that was given mammalian features and then gained the ability to fly but kept much of its stingray counterpart. They have no legs and instead, dangle from branches on their strong semi-prehensile tail. They crawl when on the ground. They live in large groups and swarm like bats during the day. The reason for their name is because of their ghostly blue-white color, and their ability to scream at a sonic frequency to stun prey before swarming it like piranhas. Their screams sound like a person crying in pain. Red-faced breast, a name I had no part in making, is a medium navy blue bird with a featherless face and neck that is colored red with 2 organs on the chest that expand when filled with air. They use this as both intimidation and mating. They will also produce a high-frequency call with the organs. They play the role of carrion birds and eat the dead or decaying. Dodo bird, this bird was a creation of my own design during the early testings on the Singularity Soul. By using a pigeon I evolved it into a new subspecies that is still referred to as a dodo, but with one difference that will be its most viable survival mechanism on the island as the main food source, its reproduction. If not eating, the dodo will mate constantly. This causes an explosion in population since once an egg is laid it will hatch in 24 hours and then develop into an adult in just a week, compensating for their lack of intelligence and awareness. How Pete is still alive despite the fast aging process is beyond me. Ancient peafowl, these birds are another of my own personal designs that I made back when I was testing the effect of the Singularity Soul on different creatures. In doing so I discovered the radiation, depending on what frequency it was, could induce evolution or quirks. During experimentation, I found that peafowl can gain a hypnotic quirk. I also used the same hypnotic peafowl to test my evolution theory and somehow was able to turn it into a more primal form from when it was still a dinosaur but still allowing it to keep its modern appearance and quirk. In short, they look like normal peafowl at a glance, but look closer and you'll see they look like little raptors. Their beaks shortened and had razor-sharp teeth, their feet gained talons and one exaggerated raptor claw, their wings reformed fingers with claws, and their eyes moved fully to the front. They still act like peafowl but are much more aggressive and have become much more carnivorous alongside losing the ability to fly, but can run far faster. Terrestrial, this last group of animals I will cover before moving on with the rest of my report. This includes Sleipnir, Dodongo, Screamers, Jackalope, Inusotherium, Brambleback, cats, bears, unicorns, and Deku sheep. Sleipnir, this horse-like creature was made from a horse and resembles a horse in every way apart from 2. It has 6 legs and no body hair. Due to its larger size, it has much larger lungs, heart, and layered muscles allowing it to run fast and for long periods. It was supposed to be an alternative to horses for labor and transportation but came with the harsh side effect of being natural finger biters. Their skin comes in as many coat colors as regular horses but only one body plan. A rare Sleipnir with a full coat, mane, and tail is called a unicorn. Dodongo, this creature was also made from horses but for a completely different reason. Due to the still ongoing, but slowing, growth of Pacifica. Rocks began to overtake both the beaches and forests, uprooting trees and destroying plant life. So in response, we made a creature that gets most of its substance from stone and we made a lot. Its blunt yet sturdy teeth can cut and grind down stone with ease and its highly corrosive stomach acid can break it down with ease. Despite being made from a horse, they look nothing like one. Almost like one that evolved after humans went extinct and couldn't selectively breed them anymore. They are large, wide, low, slow-moving, short-legged with short faces and snubbed noses with large bull horns, short tails, ash-gray skin with no body hair, 5-toed limbs, and a relaxed disposition. They are so relaxed and unbothered by everything that they will allow you to poke, prod, and try to push them around without any backlash. Note, Dodongo milk is very sweet and holds the same consistency as yogurt. Screamers, this small creature resembles a wild dog with several reptilian features. They are highly social pack hunters that live in groups of 10 to 20. They have large eyes and large ears, which allows them to be perfect nocturnal predators. The reason for their name is that they communicate and frighten prey by screaming. They can even mimic the distress calls of other animals. They use this to induce panic when there is no need for it or to misguide prey. Jackalope, this creature appears as a North American hare but except for a horn growing from the top of its forehead. They act, eat, and reproduce like regular hares, except for the horn. Even though they don't use it to fight, any male can come equipped with either 1 to 3. Unfortunately, most females favor a male with a single long strong horn. If the horn is short, broken, in an irregular spot, or if not all horns present are the same length, they won't mate. Brambleback, these are a group of herbivorous mammals with turtle-like shells. Like the dodongo, they are short-legged, low-walking, wide, slow, five-toed, heavy animals but much larger. Around the size of an elephant. They have short faces, slits for noses, an ear hole, large oxen horns, a semi-prehensile shove-like tail, a black shell that covers them to where their knee joints are, and shaggy brown hair on their underside, legs, and face. On their back are a menagerie of osteoderm growths that take the form of brambles. They will use these osteoderms to snag and hook plants onto their back, where they will then use their shovel tails to scoop and sprinkle dirt in their backs. This will cause their shells to become a mobile garden. The ones with the largest, healthiest, and most eye-catching gardens will be able to mate. When sleeping, they will use the natural grooves in their shells to dig themselves into the ground, completely protecting their unarmored underside. They are also extremely strong, able to knock over the oldest trees to eat the leaves. This dietary style allows open areas for grass and shrubs to grow with natural pathways through dense woods. The gardens on their backs allow them to spread fertile soil and new seeds to different areas. In Eusitherium, these creatures are large ungulates that appear very similar to the ancient Parasitarium, standing between 15 and 20 feet tall. As of now, only 2 have been made and I shall go over both in this section. Rumblehorns are the most muscular and strongest of the 2 species. They have almost no hair and are covered in thick loose skin that is colored from brown to gray. They are very gentle with small creatures, especially humans, almost acting like horses, and highly aggressive to bigger creatures. The 2 most noticeable features on them are the horns and spurs. The horns, grown to look like massive antlers, are used in fighting and self-defense. The spurs are used solely for matting fights, as the feet are more effective at crushing would-be attackers. Loophorns are weaker but far taller and faster than the rumblehorns. They are covered in shaggy hair that has patterns similar to a giraffe, and their temperament of them, with the addition of a mane present in both males and females that goes from their head down the length of their necks. Besides this, their most striking feature is their horns, which have grown into perfect circles, with males being the biggest. They use these horns to eat. By walking on their hind legs and backwards, they can hook almost any size of branch through them. Once hooked, then stand on all fours and allow the branches to hang down towards their faces, where they can easily eat with their long tongue. When finished, they simply walk away and allow the branch to slide out of its horns. This helps the trees by stripping away dead leaves, freeing up space for new ones, pruning back branches, or just breaking off dead ones. If a branch snaps and falls to the floor, it is eaten by ground feeders or used as mulch. If the branch breaks and stays on the horns, they will walk off with it as a snack on the go. Cats, we have only made 2 different cat-like creatures, and as such I shall go over both in this section. White-maned mauler is a big cat that closely resembles a leopard, but with the males possessing a white mane, similar to lions. They live in family groups of 2 or 4, and females do most of the hunting while males tend to cubs. They are just as strong, fast, and stealthy as leopards, but with one difference. Instead of choking prey to death, they will maul it to death, leading to a drawn-out kill. Some of them even use the death roll like gators and crocs. Cheshire cat is a small cat similar in structure, appearance, and behavior to a Pallas cat, with 2 key differences. The Cheshire cat can change the pigmentation of its fur to camouflage in almost any environment, and its unique facial muscles which allow it to smile. But this is a sign of aggression, and if it does smile at you, run and protect your vitals. Bears, like many others, we have only made 2, so I'll go over both in detail. Galloping Ursa is a medium solitary bear with a body plan like a running animal that can hit speeds of 45 miles per hour. Due to its body and much lighter weight, it is nearly entirely a carnivore and chases down fast prey with specialized teeth to grab tightly. They often work with screamers to take down larger, faster, or flighty prey. Short-faced mountain shakers are the largest of these two bears and outsize the ancient short-faced bears of North America. Due to their size, they move very slowly and only run in short bursts, so they target slow-moving prey. Due to this, brambleback and dodongo are their preferred prey. Using their massive bodies and strength, they can easily topple these huge creatures on their back to expose their soft undersides. Unicorns. These are the most abundant of the creatures we made, and due to the numbers I will generalize all of them. Despite its name, these are not anything like the horse-like creatures of European mythology. The only thing that links them to their namesake is that they are four-legged hair-covered ungulates that have a horn growing from the center of their head. Many of them are more like deer and antelope in appearance and morphology. They use the single horn for self-defense, fighting, and mating. They are the most numerous, living in herds of hundreds of individuals, and come in a variety of shapes, sizes, and colors. Highly adaptable, they can live in almost any climate and can outspeed most predators. Deku sheep. This was a name I was not expecting for this animal. Although made by me, I didn't initially approve of the name since it tied to my old trauma. But after some convincing from the staff that it was made to be the opposite of its original meaning, I decided to play it. This sheep is a far more aggressive and wilder version of domestic sheep and was made by me during different testing. To learn more about it, please refer to my previous experimental logs. In short, it's perfectly suited to living in such a harsh and predator-heavy environment. And yeah, that's pretty much all the animals being sent off with Torchwick. In addition, a bunch of different bugs and fish will be sent with lots of plants that I will not cover in this log. But let's just say they're pretty tough and can resist heat and fire for when Torchwick decides he wants barbecue. I forgot to mention that in order to handle this many animals, another specialized splinter was made, called the 420 piece-out splinter. I didn't agree with this name, and I'm sure Egon didn't either. But in short, this splinter calms all creatures to a state they can be handled without the need of the good boy splinter to make them docile and domestic. Now I'm sure why many of these creatures are so dangerous. Well, 1, that's just how they were made and we didn't have the heart to kill them. And 2, it's to make sure no humans try to inhabit the island. We may go there, but that's only for research purposes. No full-time settlementations. For other things I'd like to report on. Before the invasion, Dr. Robbie and Pura both came from the original dig spot where Egon found the first Singularity Soul, where they brought 2 things. More Singularity Soul deposits, and, since I'm allowed to report on this, an alien. We called it Starro since it looked so much like a starfish but with one very human eye. It can also make copies of itself that can control people, but kill them in the process. After Torchwick decimated the Yakuza leader, we managed to get DNA samples from each one of their highest-ranking members to create splinters. In our collective, we have Chronostasis, Mimic, Barrier, Sloshed, Confession, Energy Suck, Strong Arm, Larceny, Crystallize, Food, and Overhaul. The next thing to bring up is during the event of Overhaul turning into a giant monster, he absorbed so much of the facility that it let out an animal that wasn't supposed to. A vampire of sorts that was an attempt to fuse the bat and human immune system, but kept going wrong. Before Professor Genus could kill his failure, the invasion happened and then it escaped. Luckily it didn't stay free for long since we found it and I killed it. I'll be honest, I'm still not totally over killing that creature. It was so human it was nearly uncanny. I truly thought it was no different from a person or another intelligent creature. But when I saw its dead body afterward, my mind was set. It had a shape-shifting ability that allowed it to take a human-like form, which is why I felt so bad. But underneath that was just an animal. With no control over its physical form, it reverted back to its original state. It looked like a giant bat with a female human body. Like some furry Sona but less cut and sexy, and more horrifying and realistic. During this time we found its nest and the eggs that it laid. I'm glad we got to them as soon as we did, cause if we did, what hatched out of them would have destroyed the ecosystem in Japan. The day after we put her dozens of eggs into a testing chamber they hatched. We expected the worst, but the worst really wasn't that bad. Instead of more monsters, we got giant bats. That's it. They weren't even half as smart as their mother, which was a relief, and Dud had half of her abilities, which was another relief. As such we called them Vampire, I know, real original. Anyway, as I said, they are normal giant vampire bats, the size of horses, with a dark gray to dark brown color and a ring collar of fur around its neck, with the males colored white. Apart from that, they do have some unique adaptations. Their fur, which also has scales mixed in, can reflect moonlight in order to make them turn invisible in the night sky. They have gill-like features on their necks which don't have any aquatic purposes. They instead release a thick, opaque, gas that can hide their huge bodies and allow them to silently sneak around on the ground. Since they can see in infrared, they have no trouble navigating in their own smoke. Finally, they have the ability to mitotically reproduce and create small bat-kite creatures from their bodies they use to hide, distract, or escape. These babies have a microscopic lifespan and only live long enough to serve a one purpose and are more similar to an unintelligent copy of the parents. As you might have guessed, due to their huge size they need an exorbitant amount of food, and when they do catch something big enough they will drain it up all its blood in a matter of minutes. That's why they would be such a problem here. So that's why we're sending them to Pacifica. They will also be useful in keeping the spider population at bay. Since it was found out that Ungoliant can reproduce with a male, and since most creatures on the subcontinent would be little challenge for the giant spiders, the vampire will be useful in keeping balance and flying creature population in check. We also have no idea how they reproduce, but for now, we assume them to be like monotremes, a mammal that can lay eggs. So yeah, that's it. That's all I got. Never knew we'd have so much to cover. Anyway, I'll just end it right here and be back when more discoveries are made or experiments are done by me or others. So this is Dr. Izuku Midoriya signing off. Professor, a little voice called to Egon through dreamland, breaking the peaceful fantasy as he attempted to return to it but still sat in the darkness between the waking and unwaking. 5 more minutes, he complained, hoping the little voice would go away. And it did go away, for 3 seconds, and right at that time he went back to dreamland. Only for the little voice to start jumping on his stomach while saying, "Wake up. Wakey wakey. Ugh. Fine. I'm up. Egon finally jostled his body to make his little jumping friend stop jumping. He broke out of the limbo and opened his eyes to see a smiling Eri looking at him on his stomach. Taking a first morning breath he said, "Good morning Eri," only to get 2 paws pushed against his cheek and look over to see an old Maine Coon cat poking at him, making an impact meow. Breathing again he greeted, "And a good morning to you too, Log." "Good morning Professor Egon," Eri said back to him, rolling onto her stomach and mimicking the cat, Log, by placing her hands on his face. "Just call me Egon, Eri," Egon told the girl as he removed both their hands from his face. Egon finally sat up and stretched out like a cat before rolling off the bed and kneeling by it. He said to the minor child, "Okay. Let's take a bath and then start the day." Eri excitedly jumped from her spot and ran towards the bathroom. Egon follows long behind her, and once inside he sees the young girl running the bath and throwing in her favorite toys. He chuckled and then adjusted the water so they wouldn't boil or freeze when they got in. As the water ran, Egon and Eri brushed their teeth and combed out their hair to ready it for the bath. Once the tub was full, Egon and Eri washed and scrubbed themselves, with Egon doing most of the work for Eri. As they cleaned up, Egon played some old Italian songs that he sang, and badly on purpose, making Eri laugh hysterically. "When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that amora," he sang with the old man as Eri clapped. When the second verse came up, Egon grabbed a cup of water from the bath, put it in his mouth, and began to gargle the words. Only for regret to take over as he spat it out and choked. "There was way more soap in that than I expected," making Eri laugh even harder. After the bath, Egon wrapped Eri in a towel and himself in a bathrobe. From there he brushed out Eri's hair straight from any knots and moved to her bedroom where he picked out 3 of her outfits. If he didn't do this, she would pick the same outfit every day. "So what outfit do you want today?" he asked the girl while sitting on the floor. Eri took a while to look over the 3 options, an amount of time that Log didn't seem to like as he loudly complained, "Meow." Egon pushed the cat away and scolded, "Not now Log, Eri needs to think about what outfit to pick out." "This one," Eri finally chose while pointing to an outfit consisting of blue overalls, a red shirt, and a pink bow and shoes. Once Eri had her clothes on, and Egon too, they both moved to the kitchen for breakfast, where a confident cat voices his annoyance with no food. "Meow," Log cried. Yes Log, I'm getting you your food you grumpy old cat," Egon groaned at the old cat. "Professor," Eri calls him. "Egon," he corrected her. "Why do you call you kitty, Log?" she asked while looking down at the cat who was looking at the spot where his food bowl should be. "'Cause when I found him I swear he was a log in the woods." Though at that size he was more like a twig, Egon explains as he fills his bowl and puts it down at his feet. From there Egon prepared a Japanese-style breakfast, and as they sat down to eat, Pete the dodo walked out of his indoor nesting box and came out to his food bowl filled with a mixed bird pellet. After eating the whole thing in a few fast pecks, he tried to go after the much slower-eating log, who hissed at the bird and swatted him away. Seeing this play out, Eri called, "Prof's Egon." Egon looked up from his phone, reading the news, as Eri asked him, "Why do you bring Pete to the laboratory and not Log?" Egon swallows his food and answers, "Log is pretty old and doesn't like to move around much. So I leave him here to his own devices. He has plenty of things to keep him busy." Pete, on the other hand, he begins to say until Pete suddenly honks in fear from Log chasing him and eventually running into a wall. "Needs constant surveillance," he finishes up. After cleaning up breakfast and packaging for the trip ahead, the three of them load themselves into Egon's car. Egon was nearly as excited and happy as Eri to ride in his car since it was his very first one. Unfortunately, having never driven before, Egon had to solicit the help of a robot driver, which he didn't mind at all. After they were all safely secured, Egon told the driver, "Take us to the facility, Jeeves." The robot beeped and drove the car to the intended destination. Due to the damage accrued by the invasion, the normal front entrance had to be moved elsewhere in the building while that was blocked off due to security issues. They even had dozens of military guarding the building, courtesy of the Prime Minister, as they waited for their new facility to be made. Security was the highest issue for them. When they got to the new front entrance, Egon helped Eri out of her booster seat and let Pete out of his cage. When they walked through the front door, Egon exclaimed, "Good morning, party people." "Good morning, Professor," Eri, Pete, Megan and Josie said at the same time. "Good morning, Ms. Josie. Good morning, Ms. Morgana," Eri greeted them back with a bow. "I'm Megan, sweetie," Megan corrected her. "Oh," Eri said with a despondent expression. Megan petted her head and told her, "It's okay. You'll get the hang of it. Everyone always gets us confused at first." Egon leaned down to her and whispered, "You tell by the hair." This made Eri's eyes glow at the realization. After this they quickly stopped by Egon's office, where he dropped off his things and Pete to waddle around the room, then set off for their daily ritual. Their first stop was at the creature division, where Egon announced to the many different rooms holding different creatures, "Good morning, Animules." "Good morning, Animules," Eri announced far more shyly. They then put on winter parkas and entered Gamatha's enclosure with a bucket of apples. "Good morning, Gammoth," Eri said to the huge animal, handing her apple after apple. After this, they went to the aquatic subsection and Eri came up to the glass of one of the larger aquariums and said into a hydrophone, "Good morning, Starro." "Good more," Starro greeted back, still trying to learn human speech. Much more confident and less shy than this morning, she ran out of the aquatic subsection and onto the large creature base, where she went to a door and yelled, "Good morning, Torch Dashta," only to stop and get sad as she realized her dragon friend was gone. "Oh," she said in realization while looking at the ground. Egon placed a hand on her shoulder and assured her, "It's okay, Eri. Once we have an assured way to get to and from Pacifica, you can go visit Torchwick as much as you'd like." She looked up at him with watery eyes and nodded with a smile. After this, they went into the only remaining bug house in the facility. There they saw Professor Genus taking notes down a bunch of butterflies that swarmed around him. "Morning, Genus," Egon greeted him. The man looked up from his pad and replied, "Morning, boss, Eri." "Whatcha working on today?" Egon inquires as Eri runs around chasing the butterflies. "I just finished it. I was working with some of the dead copies from Starro and successfully spliced it into a butterfly," Genus explained to him. "Splicing alien DNA into something from Earth. Well, I'll be damned," Egon said with an impressed tone, pushing back his hair. "I made the butterfly with blank DNA, so that helped quite a bit," Genus told him, making Egon nod his head in understanding. "So what was the result?" Egon asks. Genus smiles excitedly and says, "I'll show you. Eri, can you come here for a second and stay still?" Eri does so and walks up to the man. "Good job, now I'm just gonna put this butterfly on your face, okay?" he tells her as Eri excitedly nods her head. The man then takes a butterfly and places it over her eyes. The wing pattern on the multicolored insect has eye patterns and its wings are long enough to cover and act as false eyes. Eri giggles at the tickling sensation on her nose, but she suddenly goes stiff as a statue when the wings fold over her eyes, making Egon flinch. "Okay, Eri, now put your right foot in and your right out, your right foot in and shake it all about, do the hokey pokey and turn yourself around," Genus told her, and the girl danced. Egon tightly holds the man's shoulder and demands, explanation? These are brainflies, Genus tells him with a happy yet proud tone. Egon cringes as he backs away and tries to swat away the dozens of butterflies around him. Genus realized his reaction and then followed up while rubbing the back of his head, yeah, I'm still working on the name. Anyway, they have the same effect as Staro's mind control copies, but without the whole, rip your face off and kill you thing. Egon points with his eyes at the still dancing girl and Genus quickly picks up on it before taking the butterfly off her face with ease. Eri stops at one and looks confused and drained as she asks dazed, what happened? Professor Genus here was gonna show how his butterflies work by using me, right, Egon stated. This made the man question in his head what he wanted. Then he realized he wanted to be seen as the lab rat and not Eri. So he took the same butterfly and placed it on his face. Everything went into a white haze for what seemed like seconds, and when he came back to reality he saw Eri on the ground and laughing her butt off. So whatcha make me do? Egon asked after collecting his bearings. The chicken dance, Genus whispered to him. Egon playful slapped him and said back in a fake insulted tone, you're horrible. I know, Genus laughed back. After this, Eri and Egon went around to all the other divisions and said hello to everyone else. The most surprising reaction of all came from Dr. Wily. As Eri ran into his room, the old man was furiously typing at his computer and unaware of her presence. Good morning, Mr. Wily, Eri said out of the blue. The man jumped out of his seat and covered his monitor only to calm down when he saw it was only Eri. He sighs and wants to yell at her, but sees Egon poke his head in and so goes for another approach. Don't do that, little girl. I'm old and could die. Also please leave. I have no time for idle greetings and have a great deal of work, Wily told her girl while waving him off with his hand. Eri looked disappointed by his reaction and left, leaving a suspicious Egon's head to leave the room last. Once both were gone, he breathed a sigh of relief and took out the shard of the Singularity Soul he had kept hidden in his desk. Licking his lips at the object he chuckled to himself. From here the two made their way down the hallway where they saw Izuku coming out of his office. Getting excited by seeing her second favorite person, Eri ran up to an unsuspecting boy and grabbed his legs while saying, Good morning, Izuku. Good morning, Eri, Izuku greeted her back, holding back the urge to kick her out of shock. He leaned down and hugged her back as he saw his mentor approach and say, Morning, Egon. To which he greeted back with a grunt and head nod accompanied by a smile. Well, I see you've completed your daily ritual of good mornings to everyone in the facility, the voice of Professor Cephalopod said as he walked into the room on his tentacles with a coffee mug in hand. Good morning, Professor Cephalopod, Eri greeted him. And a good morning to you as well, Eri. Ready for your classes? Otto asked her. Yeah, she stated as she took one of his tentacles and waved back, Bye-bye, Egon. Bye-bye, Izuku. Izuku waved her off and looked over to see Egon waving to her too and on the verge of tears. He sweat drops and asks, Do you always have to get so emotional at this part? They grow up so fast. Egon finally broke into an explosion of emotional sobs. Eri was led into a mock classroom where Otto stood as her teacher and taught her all her core learning activities. Despite being held back from any schooling for many years, Eri was incredibly bright and picked up on things quickly. After a few hours of classes, Otto decided to reward her efforts with a movie. So he put on The Lion King and let Eri get absorbed by it as he got absorbed in the art of war. After some time into the movie, Eri suddenly asks, Professor Cephalopod, what's a dad? The professor stops the movie and asks what she said. Eri repeated her questions and Otto put his book down while wiping sweat away as he told her, I'm the last person to be asking that since mine died after he and my mom consummated for the first and last time. Eri just looked at him confused as he sweat dropped at his confession before offering, but let me get someone else to answer that. The octopus then took out his phone and sent a text, and a few minutes later, Egon came into the classroom and asked, Everything okay, Otto? Eri had a question and I think you're the best one to answer it. Otto points to the expectantly waiting girl. Egon walks over, knees down to her desk and she says, What's a dad? Egon puts on his thinking face as he tells her, A dad? A dad is someone who cares for you, looks after you, spends time with you, protects you, makes you happy, and is a man. Does that answer your question? Yes, I think. Eri nods with uncertainty while thinking about it to herself. Okay then, have a good day at classes, he says as he walks back to the door. Just before he leaves he hears Eri say back, Okay, bye-bye Dad. At this, Egan falls to the ground right in between the automatic door which tries to close on his body. Can someone get the defibrillator? Egon went into cardiac arrest. Again, Otto calls out over the PA system. He hangs up just as fast and says with an exasperated grunt, "That man seriously needs a pacemaker." Later on, in the middle of that day, Egon, Izuku, and Eri all congregate at the front of the building and wave their arms while chanting in sync, "Oh boy, oh 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 boy." Honey Lemon, who was walking by this area, couldn't help but stop and stare at the trio and ask aloud, "What are they doing?" "Waiting for their favorite part of the day," Megan told her with a chuckle. Just then, Inko walked through the door with 3 bento boxes and said with a smile, "Hi, boys." The 3 of them threw their arms in the air and made a whooping noise of excitement. All 3 of them lined up as they happily received a box each. "For you, sweetie," Inko said to Izuku as she kissed his cheek. "Thanks, Mom," Izuku said back as he took the box and happily skipped away. "And for you, my tall drink of water," Inko said in a saucy voice. Effin leaned down to her, took the box, and began to nuzzle her as he purred, "Thanks, short, silky, and curvy." As the 2 of them did their thing, Izuku made a vomiting noise as he complained, "Oh God. Please don't make me puke when I'm about to eat," and so he ran off before they could continue. Inko then kneeled and handed off the last box as she said, "And one for you, Eri dear." "Thank you, Ms. Midoriya." Eri thanked her with a bow, making the woman smile. "Anytime. You all have a good day." She waved them off as she blew a kiss to Egon, who caught it and placed it in his pocket. Eri saw this and decided to mimic it, blowing a kiss to Egon, who caught it and placed it in his other pocket with a smile. "Hankoyo, please tell me you've finally freed your friend from that chamber. If she gets any bigger she's gonna get crushed by her mass," Egon practically begged the man over the phone as construction noises could be heard on the other end. Hankoyo, sounding equally stressed by the situation, tried to assure him in a calm tone, I know. But we are making progress." An explosion erupted on the phone line and Hankoyo was silent for a moment before following up, somewhat. Egan sighs, then asks him, "Has she had any more kids?" "Thankfully no, but she did eat the ones still left." "Have you thought up a way to transfer her to Pacifica? By the time we get here free, that cargo ship is gonna make landfall on the subcontinent," Hankoyo informed him. Egon rubbed his temples in stress as he remembered how he couldn't hold the cargo ship any longer. He thought breaking out one giant spider would be easy, but that was easier said than done. The room that the Singularity Soul was housed in was far stronger than even he realized. On one hand, he was glad his overpreparedness kept it so their greatest treasure wouldn't be stolen, on the other it made situations like this more difficult than they had to be. "I'm hoping to charter another one. But we'll see," Egon tells the man. "Wait. Hold on. Ungoliant," Hankoyo suddenly yelled as the sound of breaking could be heard and the wind. Egon instantly got panicked and yelled as he stood up from his seat, "Hankoyo? Hankoyo! What's happening?" After a bit of what sounded like static and a struggle, Hankoyo nearly yelled back, "Ungoliant just broke out of the chamber. By herself. And we're headed for the ocean." "What? Are you on her?" "The ocean is miles away," Egon exclaimed in confusion. "She jumped," Hankoyo told him as he sounded as if he was holding on to something for dear life. Before Egon could act, his nearby TV blared to life and the news anchor announced, "This just in, a giant spider has been seen jumping its way through the east side of Japan towards the harbors. It doesn't seem to be a threat at this time but the anchor stops as they receive something in their ear and then continue reporting, "We just got a live feed of what appears to be the spider attempting to make a raft. Going live now." The feed cuts to live footage of Ungoliant jumping an extremely long and high distance before coming down gracefully and only damaging the road below to a minor degree before jumping again. On her back was a very frightened Hankoyo who was holding on for his very life. She then stopped at the docking system where the cargo ship headed to Pacifica and arched her thorax towards her. She then started to spin webs faster and faster until a hurricane of webs shrouded her body. She jumped into the air once more and spread the webs out all over her bottom where it expanded out tenfold over the ocean. When she hit, instead of sinking, she floated on top of what looked to be a makeshift raft made in the shape of a spider's web. Ungoliant then sat down and used all her legs to start paddling out to sea, and much faster than expected. "Dear gods," Egon mouthed. He then heard Hankoyo say over the phone before the line cut off, Sir. Do I still have that paid time off? 'Cause I think me and Ungoliant are taking a trip out to sea." "Yeah, that's fine. You don't think she's going to Pacifica, do you?" he asked, half mindless watching the spectacle. If not, then the only other reason is that she smells the pheromone of another giant spider, Hankoyo guessed. Happy sailing, I guess. I'll call that cargo ship and tell them to wait until you get there, he tells the man before the line cuts off. Putting the phone down to cover his face and sigh, he heard his office phone ring aloud and without looking at the caller ID he flatly said, "What now?" "Was that your giant spider I just saw on the news?" the Prime Minister asked him in an impatient tone. "Yes, it was, Prime Minister. We went over this a few days ago. It's going to Pacifica, or at least I hope so. Have a good day," he quickly and bodily told her before hanging up and leaning his head back to try and ease the growing headache. Later on, Egon, Izuku, and the CEO of Uraraka Construction Co. were having an outdoor meeting about the construction plans for the new NIP building. Izuku had worked tirelessly to draw out the plans with Hatsum, but they did it and everything was either laid out or spread across a corkboard. Looking over this, the CEO blinked several times before asking, "You want us to make it so big?" "This big," Egon answered while pointing to a sheet that had the size measurements written down. "My goodness," he exclaimed. "We also want to make a dorm," Izuku added. "Oh my goodness," the CEO once again exclaimed. "Is it doable?" Izuku inquired, not liking his reaction. The man rubbed his eyes as he looked over all the finely detailed plans and told them hand gobstruck, "I mean, yes it is, but it'll be expensive and long. Money is no object to us." Egan waved his hand, making the man clutch his chest in shock. "And don't worry about time, we have some tools you can use to speed things along," Izuku told him as he took out a tool that looked like some kind of large two-handed gun with a splinter half inserted at the top. Izuku placed the weapon on the table and the man grabbed it, holding it in his hands. When his finger got a little too close to the trigger, Izuku jumped and exclaimed, "Just be careful, they overheat real quick." The man took his finger off the trigger and Izuku took it back while telling him, "If they do, take out the splinter to keep it from cracking." Izuku then held a button down and unlocked a latch that released the splinter. He pulled it out and placed it on the table where the man grabbed and examined the crystal. "Just be careful when handling the splinter raw. The quirk inside of it is pretty dash," Izuku tried to tell him until the man propped his hand on a nearby rock, turning it into a misshaped thing of spikes. "Dangerous," he trailed off as the man quickly placed the splinter back on the table. "And even if you do get done early, we'll still pay you the full amount for the time it would have taken," Egon informed him. The man wiped sweat from his face at this news as he smiles wildly behind his hand before saying in a disorganized way, "I don't know what to say except HH, he screamed out with a high-pitched screech. "That's quite the response," Izuku congratulated him. "That wasn't me," the man told him. They heard the screaming again and looked up to see a young girl around Izuku's age flying down toward them. They all backed away as she landed hard and without any backdraws. She brought up her head from her superhero landing and yelled while looking at the scientist, "Are you the ones that signed that huge contract with my parents' business?" The girl in question was Ochako Uraraka, the daughter of the CEO. Yes. "Who are you?" Egon asked her, not realizing who she was. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much." She began to kiss their feet in praise. Egon and Izuku jumped away from her offer and lifted their legs. Egon exclaimed, "Young lady. Please don't do that." "Ochako honey," Uraraka Sr. exclaimed as he pulled his daughter to her feet and held her back. But, I have to thank you for doing this. This contract will bring my parents out of the red. I'll do anything to thank you. Anything," Ochako practically yelled at them with arms open. Egon's hair stood on end and all the red flags were going off inside his head as Izuku tried to make himself as inconspicuous as possible. Standing a good arm's length away from the girl, Egon exclaimed, "Young lady, please don't say that to an adult and a horny teenager." "Egon," Izuku scolded him. "What?" Egon shot back. Izuku sighs exasperated and turns to Ochako while offering to her, "If you want to thank us, then how about donating a blood sample from each of your family so I can make them into splinters?" Ochako immediately and rapidly nodded her head as she agreed, "Yes. Of course. Thank you so much again." With that, she broke from her dad and wrapped Izuku in the first hug he received from a girl who wasn't his mother. The boy could feel her soft skin, her toned body, her warm breath, and her boobs. Holy crap, boobs. Izuku froze like a deer in headlights at the hug. He still stood there like a statue even after Ochako broke away and ran off happily. Egon, seeing an opportunity, patted the boy's shoulder and whispered in a sing-song tone, "She's kinda cute." Izuku broke out of his stupor and whipped his head to the man with a blush on his face as he yelled, "Egon!" Seeing and realizing what was happening, Uraraka Sr. joined in with a hearty laugh and exclaimed, "Ha! If you asked to marry my daughter today, I'd give you my blessings now." "Oh my God," Izuku yelled while curling into a ball while covering his face. The end of the day had finally come, and for once in a long time, Egon was able to leave in time with everyone else. As he locked the door for the night, he turned to his tired employees and said, "Good night everyone." "Good night Professor," they all said together. "Good night everyone," Eri mimicked him, far more shyly while hiding her face behind his leg. "Good night Eri," everyone said back in unison with a smile. From there Egon, Eri, and Pete all climbed into the car where the robot driver was waiting. After telling him to head home, they all buckle in for a ride. Once the car parked back in the familiar driveway, they all filed out back to the front door. Once unlocked, Egon practically kicked it open as he always does, knowing his cat wouldn't be waiting by it. Once he let Pete out of his carrier and threw his bags to the side, he slumped into his easy chair and stated, "Phew. Home sweet home. What a day." "Hi Log," Eri said to the old cat as he napped on a throw pillow on the floor. Eventually, Eri made her way onto Egon's chest where she stared at him with big pleading eyes. Egon sighs, knowing what the girl wants, and asks her, "So what do you want for dinner tonight?" Eri thought about this for a minute before answering, "Something spicy." Egon thought for a bit, smiled, and picked up the girl while walking to the kitchen with her and saying, "I have just the thing." From here he put the girl at the table and went to prepare the meal. Eri kept herself occupied by drawing, and when the food was done, there before her on a plate was a hit serving of spicy curry with a pan. The two gave thanks and began to eat. Although the spicy was extremely mild, Eri kept needing milk throughout every bite she took until the milk jug was empty. After cleaning up, Egon helped Eri choose and put on PJs, since she still wasn't sure about how to dress herself. Once she was ready for bed, Egon took her to her bed where she asked, "Will you read me this story tonight?" and pulled out a book from the bookshelf by her bed and handed it to him. "But this is the same story I read every night," Egon told her as he looked over the same book. "It's my favorite," Eri said with a pleading pout. Egon sighs and tells her, "Okay, okay. Then sit close." Egon sits on the bed where Eri takes a seat on his lap, and by heart he reads off the book he had read every night over and over again. Throughout the story Eri grows more and more sleepy, her head and eyelids drooping until eventually she is snuggled into his side and fast asleep as he finishes the book. So he picked the girl up, placed her into the bed, and tucked her in while kissing her on the forehead. "Good night, Eri. Sweet dreams," he told her in a soft voice. Just before leaving the room, he heard the girl say back in a small voice, "Good night, Dad," making the man smile as he closed the door and went into his room. There he changed into his sleepwear and jumped into bed. He looked at the calendar beside his bed and realized that this was the first week that Eri hadn't had any nightmares. He is glad to see the girl healing and coping with her trauma. But that doesn't mean he is nightmare-free. Ever since the invasion from the Yakuza and villains, Egon has found himself waking up in the middle of the night drenched in a cold sweat. He was thinking and worrying about what would happen if they did not succeed. What would happen to Eri if they couldn't protect her? What would happen to his staff? What would happen to the UA students? What would happen to Izuku? What would happen in general? But he didn't have to worry about that. He would be better next time. He would make sure he wouldn't have nightmares. He would make sure everyone would be safe. "Hello," Egon answered his phone one day at the facility only to get the gargled and rapidly incoherent yelling of Hankoyo. "Whoa whoa whoa there Hankoyo. Calm down and just tell me what's happening," Egon had to shout back at him. The man took a deep breath on the other end to calm himself and then replied, "Oh boy, where do I start?" "Okay, so it all began when we finally made landfall on Pacifica." Near the shoreline of Pacifica, the cargo ship that was carrying the NIP creatures was parked and ready to unload the many cages packaged aboard. However, they were told to wait on that since they got a call from their employer, Egon, telling them to wait until Hankoyo had arrived after drifting off the Japanese shore. And so they waited for after making landfall on the island, for about 3 hours. "Captain," one of the crewmen asked the captain inside the control deck with the man, looking through a pair of binoculars. "Yes, Private," he asked back, nose deep in the papers. "Is it just me or is there a building-sized spider floating towards us?" the crewman asked. The captain put the paper down and moved out of his chair to look through the private binoculars. There he looked around the open ocean scenery and quickly spotted what the man was looking at. And so it was that he spotted the world's largest and ugliest looking spider floating toward them on a raft made of webs. Soon the captain and the whole crew were on the port side of the boat and looking over in a mix of shock and horror as the creature began to paddle itself at a fast speed towards them with its many legs. Though before panic could settle in they saw something stand atop the creature and call out, "Ahoy over there!" "Dear God," the captain said to himself. Soon the spider came close to the ship and on its head was a scientist with 5 black tube-like structures coming out of his head. The captain knew this was the man they were supposed to be waiting for, but they didn't expect him to float into shore like this. Hankoyo did a salute and asked, "Permission to come aboard?" "Permission granted," the captain said back in a daze as the scientist jumped onto the ship's deck. "How dash?" the captain tried to ask. "Water. Water now," Hankoyo demanded with his hand out as one of the crewmen handed him a canteen that he snatched and drank dry. After sighing with relief from the drink he babbled out, "Oh thank you. You have no idea what I went through. I don't think I could drink from Ungoliant's fluid sacs another day longer." All the people on board looked at one another and the captain asked, "What?" "Desperate times call for desperate measures. Don't judge me," Hankoyo snapped at the man. The captain looked over the man and saw he had been through quite a lot. He was sunburned, his clothes had been stained by sea salt, his eyes sunken from lack of sleep, and his mouth covered in a green tinge and scales, no doubt from eating fish but had no idea about the green color. "So this is the giant spider we were supposed to transport, but got held up due to its enclosure?" the captain asked. Hankoyo changed this tune and happily told them, "Yep, this here is my pride and joy Ungoliant. Isn't she beautiful?" The people on board looked over and saw the huge and disgusting creature as it opened its mouth at them in some form of a smile. This made the people shiver in disgust and the captain replied, "Yeah, sure. How did you survive?" "Well, I drank from Ungoliant's fluid sacs," Hankoyo began. "We know, they all cut him off in sync." Hankoyo frowned at them and continued, "And she also caught fish for me. Raw fish is a killer on my stomach." With that he releases a wet fart and blushes. "Well, we're glad to see you safe, Doctor," the captain told him as he rubbed the back of his head. Hankoyo looked over the boat and saw the distance from where the ship was to the shore and asked, "So I guess you guys can't get any closer to shore?" The captain shook his head and informed him, "Not unless we want to get beached. Unloading all your creatures is gonna be a lot more time-consuming." Hankoyo placed a hand to his chin, snapped his fingers, and called out, "Ungoliant, build us a dock please." The giant spider did as she was told and leaped from her raft to the shore. Using her many legs and many large boulders by the shore, she used her black webs to start sticking them together. Within a few minutes, using the boulders as anchor points, she spun a huge dock made entirely from her webs. The dock was sturdy enough to walk on, strong enough to hold the huge cargo vessel, and large enough that Ungoliant could walk on it comfortably. Egon proudly displayed his spider's work and inquired, "How's this?" "It should suffice," the captain said in shock and amazement as the rest of the crew all looked out with equal awe. Hankoyo then looked around the ship and asked the men, "By the way, where is Torchwick?" The captain wondered what he meant for a second then realized what he was referring to, so he answered while pointing to the sky, "The dragon? He broke out of his cage and started to fly around the boat as we traveled. He's up above us now." Hankoyo used one of his tendrils to shade his face and look skywards and saw the huge shadow of Torchwick flying above them, looking quite happy at all the space and freedom he had to fly. And so Hankoyo, the cargo ship crew, and Ungoliant all aided in unloading the man cages of different creatures on the ship. Some of them were easier than most since all they had to do was release them into the open ocean, others were far harder. But thanks to Ungoliant, that would be a snap, since she could easily jump from one part of the island to the other where the creatures most suited to their most suited environments would go. Any animal released on the shore would have to be done so using the 420 piece-out splinter so none of them would get attacked. But before any of that, they first had to unload and take inventory of all the animals from the ship to the shore. While they were doing this, one of the crewmen saw what looked like a person beginning to come out from the thick forest brush closer to the island. The one person turned to 2, then 4, and 10, and more. So he called for the doctor and called, "Hey, doctor." Hankoyo, who was doing an inventory of the animals, turned his head as the crewman asked, "Didn't you say this island was uninhabited?" "Of course it is. There's nothing but plant life," Hankoyo confirmed. "Then who are they?" the crewman asked as he pointed to the group of people, now in the dozens running towards them. Maybe they're friendly, Hankoyo optimistically offered as he saw the cargo ship crew begin to panic. Only for a fireball to graze his head and hit the metal cage, he was standing by. Never mind, not friendly. Not friendly, Hankoyo screamed as they all started to run back to the ship with the hostile people screaming and chasing them. Long before they could catch up to them, Ungoliant jumped in between the massive army of violent people and screamed at them. The people, either crazy or desperate, did not halt the assault and began to attack the giant spider. Thought this wasn't a problem as the huge spider used her man legs, the mouth of many teeth, and thorax to pierce, crunch, and crush all the people. But even then they still tried to attack them and climb up the huge spider. From there the crewman and the scientist ran back to the ship where they began to run back and pull back the rampway. Once seemingly safe, the captain breathlessly asked, "Where are they all coming from? There's so many. We have more significant problems. Ungoliant is gonna get swarmed," Hankoyo yelled at him as they all looked over to see a seemingly never-ending swarm of people climb onto and attack the huge spider that was now begging to lose the battle. Fortunately for them, a secret weapon declined from the sky and Torchwick soared down with a mighty roar. He breathes a weak flame on Ungoliant to remove the people on her, but keeping her unharmed. He then flew by the army of people and breathed out a straight line of flames across the sand. People got knocked away by the sheer pressure of the flames or engulfed and incinerated by them. Anyone still left over from that attack, and especially seeing the dragon, ran back into the forest where Torchwick landed and let out a bellowing roar towards the first, warning all the leftover people. Seeing their dire situation turn in their favor, relief washed over all of them and the captain exclaimed, "Thank God we have that dragon." When the coat was cleared, the ramp was lowered again and the crew made their way back to the island. Although they had more work to do, morbid curiosity took over them as they examined the men's corpses of their attacks lying all around the beach. Many of the crew got sick of the sight and either vomited or ran away. However, one person seemed very interested in one of them and kept staring at the corpse intensely. He then called out, "Hey wait, I know this guy." This got everyone's attention and they all came around the man as he explained to them, "I saw him on the news a few weeks ago. He was some big-time villain that finally got caught and was given a life sentence." Hankoyo took out his Purapad, which he still had with him, and took a photo of the man's face. After running it through he found out it was a newly incarcerated inmate. Hankoyo thought to himself for a minute then began to run around to all the bodies and took pictures of the ones that still had intact faces. After running the faces through the finder system he found out one common thing amongst them all. So he announced it to all the people present, "Wait a second. All of these people are villains with life sentences or the death penalty. How'd they get here? Villains? On Pacifica?" Egon yelled over the phone as Hankoyo finished his story. "Yeah," Hankoyo exclaimed back. "Why'd you wait so long to tell me? You've been there for several days," Egon practically yelled at the man. "That's because something else happened. And there was no reception on Pacifica," Hankoyo told him. Egon slapped himself on the head in stupidity and said, "Oh right. Go on. After we unloaded the animals and plants into their selected environments, we took a few days to rest, refuel the ship, and get the coordinates for home. In that time, not only did I take recordings and notes on the creatures acclimating to their new environments, Torchwick did something I didn't expect," he explained vaguely. "What did he do?" Egon prompted him further. "That brings me to this question. Torchwick is a guy, right?" Hankoyo inquired. Egon was silent for a moment before answering, "We never determined that, but we called him a boy simply because it was easier." "Why?" "'Cause he laid eggs, a lot of them. And all over Pacifica," the man finally told him. "Eggs?" Egon repeated the word in surprise. "Yeah, big ones too. I wanted to take a few samples home with me, but they hatched really fast," the man explained further. "What came out?" Egon prompted him. This is when Hankoyo sounded far more serious as he exclaimed, "Dragons. Lots and lots of dragons. And different ones too. All are designed to survive in several different locations. And if that wasn't enough, they were all born, grown." "As in, small adults?" Egon questioned. "As in fully grown adults ready to take on the world and mate," Hankoyo corrected him. "By the gods. I would have never guessed," Egon muttered to himself before sighing and telling him, "Once we have an easier way to travel between Pacifica, we'll start to document them. I'll also be calling the Prime Minister about this. I'll get back to you with more info." After hanging up on him, Egon dials the number to the Prime Minister's office. After a bit of back and forth with her secretary, He's put on a brief hold where the woman herself picks up and answers cordially saying, "Professor. To what do I owe the dashta?" But Egon cuts her off and firmly asks her, getting increasingly aggravated, "Hey Prime Minister, how are you?" "Great? That's great. Hey, speaking of talking, how about you talk of the reason there are criminals on my uninhabited and dangerous subcontinent?" The woman was silent for a moment, then asked out of the blue, "Professor Egon. Do you know how many jails there are in Japan?" 62, not counting everything for juveniles. "Why is this relevant?" Egon answers with ease and asks back. "Do you know how fast the crime rate shot up during the heyday of quirks?" she inquires again. This time it takes Egon a minute to think, then tells her, 89%? Exactly. And those numbers aren't going any lower, the woman asserts to him. "Maybe if you worked on restructuring Japan, maybe it would go down." Egon rolls his eyes and gripes to her. The Prime Minister goes silent for a moment, her irritation able to be felt through the phone lines as she says, "Ignoring what you said, the taxpayers and government of Japan can't continue to keep the already overstocked prisons in working order. And due to the law, we can only institute so many death penalties in a year. So this was the alternative. Sending them to an uninhabited island in the middle of the ocean was your alternative," Egon exclaimed to her. She says nothing to this, so Egon continues to chew her out. "You do realize this brings up several ethical liabilities into play? You're not Great Britain dumping their prisoners in Australia. And not even bringing up the fact that Pacifica is not yours to do with. Technically speaking, it's not yours either. And don't call it abandonment. Call it relocation," she tells him with a sinister calmness in her tone. Egon groans loud enough for her to hear, and he shoots back in a deadly serious tone, "Do you know what the press, let alone the world, would think if you were throwing inmates onto an island only to be killed by the environment and wildlife? And what if they escape or manage to tame some of the animals? Some are nice to humans. Do you know what the world would think of the alien you're trying to hide?" The Prime Minister shot back at him, making the man nearly drop the phone from shock as he felt his sins crawl on his back. "We all have our secrets, Professor. You said so yourself," she tells him with a chuckle in her throat. Gon goes from shock to repressed rage, and he resists the urge to hiss as he replies, "Don't think I won't act on this. I'm sure you will. Have a good day," she tells him offhandedly while hanging up on him. Egon carefully placed the phone down and tried to calm his rising nerves. He punches his table hard enough to draw blood and knocks over the small stack of papers on his desk. After gaining control of himself, he picks up his other phone and dials a number. Hankoyo picks up the call and answers with a confused, "Hello? Tell that spider you start the baby-making factory. We've got an island TO purge," Egon yells through the phone lines. "Hello there, my name is Dr. Albert W. Wiley, an inventor here at the UGH, Neo Icon Phoenix Research Facility, or NIP for short. I'm keeping this log secret from my employers. Now that I, the great Dr. Wiley, have gained access to a place such as this, I can finally begin my true purpose of continuing my robotics initiative. Ha ha ha, I hope no one hears me say that. Anyhow, this log must be done in absolute secret from my employers. They wouldn't understand my machinations. Development and progress must be made under any circumstances, even to the detriment of the innocent. So to begin this experience I must be able to cover my tracks. So while I work on the robot, on the side I'll be working on something else to be used as a Trojan horse. I have all the planes set up, now I only need to acquire a large enough chunk of the Singularity Soul. The very material used in skyrocketing this small operation into the forefront of scientific technology. My plan was successful and I was able to procure a chunk of the Singularity Soul from my employers after showing them my further plan. They seem none the wiser. I must make this next part look good if I'm to succeed. Project Mono is underway. After 3 weeks of work, I have finally put my false machine together and have Project Mono nearly half done in its construction. I brought my take device to my employers to show off. And just like planned, the machine failed during the test show. I have to say I put on a pretty good act, even when I went to retrieve the Singularity Soul and saw how it had unfortunately disintegrated. But that was simply a ruse, as I hid the Singularity Soul away in a secret compartment. Now with it in hand, Project Mono can begin. After another 3 weeks of work, I've fished the frame, wiring, exoskeleton, and other basic mechanics. I just need to integrate weapons, AI, and a power source. One of which I have. This will truly be my greatest work yet. And I can finally stick it in the big fat nose of Dr. Light and that stupid robot he calls Mega Man. Bah! I have constructed and integrated all weapons into Project Mono. all of which are powered by their own specific splinter. Thanks to the Singularity Soul Power Mono, it will also supercharge the splinters inside, bringing them to their full potential. During this process, I found out that to be able to have Mono do what I intend requires a large body. So I had to go back and supersize Mono from a mere 4 feet to well over 9 foot tall. From here on, I worked on the AI and downloaded it into its core processor. Afterward, I had the chassis and exterior armor pieces around it. All I have to do is wait until AI completes downloading and testing. Then I can add the power source. I've been found out. I should have expected it. Things were going well for me, too well. Looking back on it, I made several slip-ups but was never called out for it. I should have known they had this place decked out in every possible security and contingency. With what they're working with, they have to. I expected to be canned and Mono destroyed. I expected to have to go on the run once again. But this time I was different. Sure, I got my ear chewed off by Dr. Midoriya, but I kept my job and position, and Mono too. However, he was to be placed into immediate storage and containment. According to Dr. Midoriya, I made Mono far more powerful than I anticipated. And the AI wouldn't hold up in the long run. It would undoubtedly degrade, leading Mono to go mad. And from what I heard, I was looking to create something 10 times more powerful than All Might himself. So as of now, Project Mono is shelved. However, Dr. Midoriya allowed me to carry out my robot initiative, but this time using blank splinters I needed to fill and make smaller, weaker, and far more manageable robots. I think I shall call this next project the Man series. In addition, Dr. Hatsum has asked for my aid in perfecting the assassin droids and creating new guards and battle droids. Especially using the newly discovered and created ancient technology and weapons, courtesy of Dr. Pura and Robbie. This is truly a task worthy of my undertaking and skills. I think he called them the Valkyries. On a small side note, the reason for my naming of Project Mono was due to it meaning one or first. Since Mono would have been the first and best of his kind. This is Dr. Wiley signing off. End log. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, share the video and support the original writer. See you in the next video?